Royal guards just exposed Queen Camilla in the most shocking scandal of the century. They found Queen Elizabeth's stolen crown jewels hidden in Camilla's secret vault. The palace is in complete panic mode trying to cover this up, but we got the footage first.
And no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes. And that was because they were angry with Camilla. They were furious.
This will absolutely destroy everything you thought you knew about the royal family. The story begins with Sergeant Nathan Corbin, a 7-year veteran of the Royal Guard, who had been personally appointed by Queen Elizabeth to oversee the legacy chamber.
Queen Elizabeth says she wants Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, to be known as Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes king.
This wasn't a ceremonial position. The legacy chamber housed some of the most precious and historically significant pieces of the royal collection, items that rarely left the castle walls and were considered irreplaceable links to British history. On what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning, Corbin was reviewing routine maintenance logs on his computer when something unusual caught his attention. The screen displayed a brief entry that most people would have scrolled past without a second thought. It was a simple line of text marked with code temp relock QLPD192, followed by what appeared to be an outdated authorization signature. The code itself raised immediate red flags. QLPD192 was an archival reference that hadn't been used in over 2 years, not since a particular staff member had left their position at Windsor. Yet here it was, appearing in recent transfer logs as if it were still active and legitimate. Corbin's military training had taught him to trust his instincts when something felt wrong, and this definitely felt wrong. He clicked through the entry details, uncovering information that made his concerns grow stronger with each line he read. The log showed that a sapphire pendant, officially registered under Queen Elizabeth's personal custody, had been transferred to something called Albemarle Heritage Consultants for what was described as off-site display curation. The authorization appeared to come from an external referral system that should have required multiple levels of approval, yet the paperwork seemed surprisingly sparse. This particular sapphire pendant wasn't just any piece of jewelry. Corbin remembered it clearly from Queen Elizabeth's final public appearances. It was a teardrop-shaped sapphire surrounded by Welsh diamonds that the Queen had worn during some of her most significant ceremonial events. The piece had never been part of any public exhibition program, had never been loaned to museums, and certainly had never been mentioned in any of the modernization discussions that had been circulating through Windsor in recent months. Driven by growing suspicion, Corbin began searching through the backup systems for similar irregularities. What he found was deeply troubling. 3 additional pieces showed identical patterns of suspicious activity, all within the past 6 weeks. An emerald coronet that had been part of the Queen's private collection had been logged for transfer using the same outdated authorization code. A coronation brooch featuring South African diamonds, a gift that had remained in Elizabeth's personal custody throughout her reign, was also marked for temporary relocation. Most concerning of all was a 4-strand pearl choker that had belonged to the Queen Mother, another piece with deep sentimental and historical value. All 4 items shared several disturbing characteristics. They had been processed using the same defunct reference code, approved through the mysterious Albemarle Heritage Consultants, and according to shipping records, sent to addresses in Norfolk. The documentation for each transfer appeared legitimate on the surface, but lacked the detailed authorization chains that such valuable items would normally require. Corbin's investigation revealed that Albemarle Heritage Consultants wasn't listed on any approved vendor database that he could access. The company appeared to specialize in heritage preservation services, but their credentials and history remained frustratingly vague. Previous work mentioned connections to private collectors in international markets, which only added to his concerns about where these irreplaceable artifacts might ultimately end up. The shipping manifest told an even more troubling story. The items had been packaged as household memorabilia, rather than being properly classified as crown jewels or historical artifacts. This misclassification would have allowed them to bypass several security protocols that were specifically designed to prevent unauthorized removal of royal treasures. As Corbin continued his investigation, he realized the scope of what appeared to be happening. These weren't isolated incidents or administrative errors. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to systematically remove valuable pieces from the royal collection, disguise them as routine transfers, and relocate them to private facilities outside of official oversight. The Norfolk connection was particularly significant. This region housed several private estates with connections to senior members of the royal family, including properties that had been expanded and renovated in recent years to include specialized storage and display facilities. Some of these estates had even applied for permits to build climate-controlled preservation galleries, ostensibly for private art collections. What made the situation even more concerning was the timing. All of these transfers had occurred in the months following Queen Elizabeth's death, during a period when many administrative systems were being updated and reorganized. It would have been relatively easy for someone with inside knowledge to exploit the temporary confusion and reduced oversight that naturally occurred during such transitions. Corbin found himself facing a profound dilemma. His discovery suggested that someone with significant authority and access was systematically removing pieces of Britain's cultural heritage from their rightful place in the royal collection. These weren't just valuable objects. They were tangible connections to decades of royal history, pieces that had witnessed coronations, state visits, and private family moments spanning generations. The weight of his discovery pressed heavily on his shoulders, as he realized that without immediate action, these irreplaceable artifacts could disappear into private collections or international markets forever. Once scattered to private hands, recovering them would become exponentially more difficult, if not impossible. As the morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of the legacy chamber, casting colored shadows across the empty pedestals where some of these pieces once displayed, Corbin understood that he was standing at a crossroads. He could file a routine report through normal channels, knowing it might get buried in bureaucratic processes, or he could take the significant risk of escalating his concerns directly to people who might actually have the authority to act quickly. The decision he made in that moment would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to one of the most sensitive royal operations in recent memory, testing the boundaries between duty, protocol, and the preservation of national heritage. Sergeant Corbin understood that his discovery needed validation from someone with deeper institutional knowledge before he could take any official action. The Royal Archives contained decades of records and protocols, and more importantly, it housed people who understood the complex systems that governed how royal artifacts were managed and protected. Lady Caroline Whitby represented exactly the kind of institutional memory that Corbin needed. With 40 years of experience working within the royal household's administrative systems, she had witnessed multiple transitions of power, numerous reorganizations, and countless changes in protocol. If anyone could help him understand whether his suspicions were justified, it would be someone with her background and access to historical records. Their meeting took place in one of the forgotten reading rooms on the second floor of the Royal Archives, a space that most of the modernization committees never visited. The room itself reflected the weight of history, with leaded windows filtering afternoon sunlight across leather-bound registers that contained centuries of royal documentation. It was the kind of environment where serious conversations about institutional integrity could take place without interruption or oversight. When Corbin presented his evidence, Lady Whitby's reaction confirmed his worst fears. Her decades of experience had taught her to recognize patterns of irregularity, and what she saw in his documentation clearly troubled her. The shipping manifests, authorization codes, and transfer records all pointed to a systematic operation that bypassed normal security protocols. Her analysis revealed additional concerning details that Corbin had missed during his initial investigation. The timing of the transfers coincided with periods when certain oversight committees were not in session, suggesting that whoever orchestrated these movements understood the administrative calendar well enough to exploit temporary gaps in supervision. This level of inside knowledge implied involvement from someone with intimate familiarity with royal household operations. Lady Whitby's examination of the documentation also revealed sophisticated attempts to make the transfers appear legitimate. The paperwork included references to heritage preservation standards and cultural protection protocols, using official terminology that would satisfy casual review, while avoiding the deeper scrutiny that genuinely authorized transfers would receive. This suggested professional knowledge of both legal requirements and administrative procedures. The trail led them to focus on the Norfolk connections, where shipping records indicated the artifacts had been delivered to addresses associated with private estates that had recently undergone significant renovations. These properties had applied for building permits that included specialized facilities for storing and displaying valuable collections, complete with climate control systems and security measures typically found in professional museums. Understanding the gravity of what they had uncovered, Lady Whitby made a decision that would prove crucial to the entire investigation. She reached into a locked drawer and retrieved contact information for Inspector Roel Choudhary of the Metropolitan Police Heritage Unit, a specialized division that dealt specifically with crimes involving cultural artifacts and historical treasures. Choudhary's involvement brought a new level of professional expertise to the investigation. The Heritage Unit had experience with similar cases involving the unauthorized movement of valuable cultural items, and their resources included access to international databases that track stolen art and artifacts. More importantly, they understood the legal frameworks needed to take action against sophisticated theft operations. The inspector's initial review of the evidence revealed disturbing parallels to previous cases his unit had investigated. 2 years earlier, they had looked into reports of private artifacts from Balmoral appearing in Geneva auction houses, but that investigation had been quietly shut down after what was described as palace intervention. The similarity in methods and the involvement of the same networks suggested a pattern of ongoing activity rather than isolated incidents. Choudhary's analysis of the authorization codes confirmed Corbin's suspicions about their illegitimate nature. The QLPD 192 reference had indeed been retired following staff changes, and its reactivation would have required approval from multiple departments within the royal household. No such approvals existed in any official records, indicating that someone had deliberately used outdated credentials to bypass security measures. The investigation also uncovered the role of L.R. Meredith, the heritage logistics consultant, whose name appeared on every suspicious transfer document. Research into Meredith's background revealed previous work with private collectors in Monaco and Dubai, markets known for their discretion regarding the provenance of valuable items. This international connection raised the stakes considerably, as it suggested the possibility that these artifacts could be moved outside British jurisdiction entirely. Cross-referencing shipping records with estate renovation permits painted a clearer picture of the operation's scope. The Norfolk estates had invested significantly in creating facilities that could professionally store and display valuable collections, suggesting a long-term strategy rather than temporary storage arrangements. The sophistication of these installations indicated substantial financial investment and careful planning. The evidence also revealed attempts to create a paper trail that would support claims of legitimate ownership or custody. Documents describe the transferred items as part of heritage preservation initiatives and cultural education programs, using language that could potentially justify private possession of these artifacts if challenged in court. This level of legal preparation suggested involvement from people with significant resources and professional advice. Inspector Choudhary explained the challenges his unit faced when investigating cases involving high-profile individuals or institutions. Political pressure, administrative obstacles, and concerns about public relations often limited their ability to pursue investigations fully, even when evidence clearly supported criminal charges. However, the systematic nature of this particular case and its potential impact on national heritage created compelling reasons to proceed despite these challenges. The investigation revealed that the missing artifacts represented more than just valuable objects. They were irreplaceable links to specific moments in British history. The sapphire pendant had been photographed during state visits and memorial services, creating a public record of its significance. The coronation brooch carried symbolic weight related to Commonwealth relationships and royal traditions. The emerald coronet and pearl choker connected current royal ceremonies to previous generations, maintaining continuity across decades of change. As their investigation progressed, it became clear that recovering these items would require more than standard police procedures. The artifacts were being held in private facilities by people with significant resources and legal representation. Any attempt at recovery would need to navigate complex questions about authorization, jurisdiction, and the rights of various parties involved in the transfers. The evidence they had gathered painted a picture of systematic exploitation of administrative transitions and security gaps to remove valuable cultural artifacts from their protected status. The sophistication of the operation, the involvement of international networks, and the potential for these items to disappear permanently into private collections created an urgent need for decisive action. Corbin found himself at the center of a discovery that went far beyond his original concerns about administrative irregularities. He had uncovered what appeared to be a coordinated effort to permanently remove pieces of Britain's cultural heritage from public protection, potentially making them available to private collectors who would have no obligation to preserve their historical significance or maintain their connection to national identity. The weight of this responsibility, combined with the knowledge that time was running out to prevent permanent loss of these irreplaceable artifacts, meant that the next phase of action would need to involve people with the authority and resources to challenge powerful interests and recover what had been taken. The decision to escalate the investigation to the highest levels of royal authority marked a turning point in what had begun as a routine security review. Sergeant Corbin's evidence had convinced both Lady Whitby and Inspector Chudari that immediate action was necessary, but recovering artifacts from private estates would require authorization that went far beyond normal police procedures. The meeting at Clarence House took place in a wood-paneled conference room that had witnessed decades of sensitive royal decisions. Unlike the high-tech command centers often portrayed in films, this was a space defined by tradition and discretion, with antique furniture and historical portraits creating an atmosphere of institutional gravitas. The presence of Colonel James Stretton, a senior military advisor with decades of experience in sensitive operations, signaled that this matter had reached the attention of people who could authorize extraordinary measures. Stretton's review of the evidence was thorough and methodical. His military background had taught him to assess situations based on facts rather than assumptions, and the documentation presented by Corbin painted a clear picture of systematic theft disguised as legitimate administrative transfers. The colonel's questions focused on verification of provenance, chain of custody documentation, and the legal foundation for any recovery operation. The artifacts in question were not merely valuable objects, but items specifically designated under Queen Elizabeth's personal custody, creating a legal framework that differed significantly from standard theft cases. Royal artifacts fell under special protection statutes that gave the Crown specific rights and responsibilities regarding their preservation and location. This legal distinction would prove crucial in authorizing the recovery operation. When Prince William entered the conference room, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. His presence indicated that the matter had reached the attention of someone with both the authority to make decisions and the responsibility to protect royal heritage. Unlike the dramatic confrontations often depicted in entertainment, his approach was measured and focused on understanding the full scope of the situation before determining appropriate action. William's questions revealed a deep understanding of the institutional significance of the missing artifacts. These pieces were not simply expensive jewelry, but tangible connections to his grandmother's legacy and the continuity of royal traditions. The sapphire pendant, coronation brooch, emerald coronet, and pearl choker each carried specific historical significance that went far beyond their monetary value. The briefing revealed additional concerns about the potential destination of these artifacts. Intelligence gathered by Inspector Chudari's unit suggested connections to international art markets, where valuable items could disappear permanently into private collections. Once these pieces entered such networks, recovering them would become exponentially more difficult and could take years of legal proceedings with uncertain outcomes. Colonel Stretton outlined the challenges involved in mounting a recovery operation. The artifacts were located on private property belonging to senior members of the royal family, creating jurisdictional complexities that standard law enforcement procedures were not designed to handle. Any action would need to balance legal requirements with the need for discretion and the preservation of institutional relationships. The solution involved creating a specialized team that combined expertise from multiple areas. Royal guards with experience in artifact protection would handle identification and secure transport. Metropolitan Police Heritage Unit officers would ensure proper legal procedures and evidence documentation. Military personnel with logistical experience would coordinate the complex operation across multiple locations. Planning for the operation required careful consideration of timing, security, and legal authorization. The team would need to move quickly enough to prevent the artifacts from being relocated again, but methodically enough to ensure that all procedures were properly documented and legally defensible. The operation would also need to maintain absolute discretion to avoid public attention that could complicate recovery efforts. The staging area at Northolt Aircraft Hangar reflected the serious nature of the undertaking. Unlike the public ceremonies and pageantry typically associated with royal activities, this operation emphasized functionality and professional efficiency. The hangar provided secure space for equipment preparation, briefings, and coordination without attracting unwanted attention. Team preparation involved detailed review of estate layouts, security systems, and access protocols. Intelligence gathering had revealed the locations of climate-controlled storage areas where the artifacts were likely being held, along with the security measures that had been installed to protect these facilities. The team also prepared specialized equipment for safely transporting valuable artifacts without risking damage during the recovery process. Each team member received specific assignments based on their expertise and experience. Sergeant Corbin would lead artifact identification, drawing on his years of experience working with the Royal Collection and his intimate knowledge of the missing pieces. Inspector Chudari would oversee legal documentation and ensure that all evidence was properly collected and preserved for potential future proceedings. The operational plan emphasized minimizing disruption while ensuring complete recovery of all missing artifacts. The team would approach the estate with proper legal authorization, but would attempt to secure cooperation rather than confrontation whenever possible. However, they were prepared to use their full legal authority if cooperation was not forthcoming. Transportation logistics involved multiple vehicles and specialized containers designed for moving valuable artifacts safely. Museum-quality transport cases would protect the items from temperature fluctuations, vibration, and other environmental factors that could cause damage. The convoy would follow predetermined routes that avoided public areas and provided secure transfer back to Windsor Castle. Communication protocols ensured that all team members remained coordinated throughout the operation while maintaining operational security. Encrypted radio systems would allow real-time coordination without risking interception of sensitive information. Body cameras would document all interactions and procedures for legal protection and institutional accountability. As the team prepared to depart from Northolt, the gravity of their mission was clearly understood by everyone involved. They were not simply recovering stolen property, but preserving irreplaceable pieces of national heritage that connected current generations to centuries of royal history. The success of their operation would determine whether these artifacts remained part of Britain's cultural legacy or disappeared forever into private hands. The convoy's departure marked the transition from planning to execution, carrying with it the hopes of everyone who understood the true significance of what had been lost, and the determination to ensure that Queen Elizabeth's legacy remained intact for future generations to understand and appreciate. The professional calm that characterized the team's preparation reflected years of training and experience in handling sensitive operations, But everyone understood that the challenges ahead would test their skills, judgment, and commitment to preserving one of the most important collections of cultural artifacts in British history. The Norfolk estate presented an image of refined English elegance that masked the serious nature of what was about to unfold. Manicured gardens, climbing roses on iron gates, and limestone walls covered in carefully trimmed ivy created an atmosphere of peaceful countryside luxury. However, the recovery team's attention was focused on security systems, access points, and the locations of climate-controlled facilities where stolen royal artifacts were believed to be stored. The estate's transformation over recent years had been remarkable in both scope and sophistication. What had once been a traditional country residence had been expanded with underground facilities, specialized storage areas, and climate-controlled preservation galleries that rivaled professional museum installations. Building permits filed with local authorities described these additions as private art storage and display facilities, but their specifications suggested capabilities far beyond typical residential collections. The investment in these facilities had been substantial, involving specialized contractors with experience in museum-grade installations, temperature control systems, humidity regulation equipment, and advanced security measures had transformed sections of the estate into something resembling a high-end auction house or private museum. The level of professional expertise involved in these renovations indicated careful planning and significant financial resources. Inspector Choudhury's approach to the main entrance followed established legal protocols for heritage protection operations. The elderly steward who answered the door appeared genuinely surprised by the arrival of official visitors, his confusion evident as he examined the official documentation presented to him. His reaction suggested that regular estate staff had been kept largely uninformed about the true nature of the valuable items being stored on the property, indicating compartmentalized knowledge that limited awareness of the operation's full scope. The steward's willingness to cooperate and his apparent lack of preparation for such a visit revealed important details about how the artifact transfer operation had been conducted. It appeared that the movement of royal jewelry to the estate had involved only a small number of individuals with specific knowledge, while regular household staff continued their normal duties without understanding what valuable items were now housed in the specialized facilities. Meanwhile, Sergeant Corbin's team successfully accessed the estate through service entrances, using security codes that had remained unchanged since Queen Elizabeth's final official inspection of the property. This oversight and security protocols proved crucial to the operation's success, allowing the recovery team to reach storage areas without immediate confrontation or delay. The fact that these access codes continued to function revealed gaps in security reviews that should have been conducted following any significant changes in the property's use. The team's movement through the estate revealed additional security vulnerabilities that had not been addressed. Surveillance systems appeared to focus primarily on perimeter protection rather than internal monitoring, suggesting that security planning had emphasized preventing unauthorized entry rather than tracking activities within the property. This approach made sense for a private residence, but was inadequate for a facility storing items of national significance. The discovery of the converted carriage house revealed the extraordinary sophistication of what had been created at the Norfolk estate. What the recovery team encountered was far more than simple storage. It was a meticulously designed private gallery that could rival the display quality of major museums. Professional lighting systems cast perfect illumination on each piece, while advanced climate control equipment maintained ideal temperature and humidity levels for preserving valuable artifacts. Museum-quality display cases, each custom-fitted to its contents, had been arranged throughout the space with the kind of attention to detail typically found in world-class institutions. The flooring, lighting angles, and even the wall colors had been chosen to enhance the visual impact of the displayed items. This level of professional curation suggested involvement from individuals with extensive experience in high-end art presentation and museum design. The transformation of the space represented a significant financial investment, with estimates suggesting costs that would have rivaled the budget for a small museum renovation. Specialized contractors, conservation equipment, and custom display systems would have required substantial resources and careful coordination. The quality of the installation indicated that this was intended as a permanent facility rather than temporary storage. Most disturbing to the recovery team was the realization that this facility had been designed not just to store valuable artifacts, but to present them to potential viewers in the most impressive possible manner. The arrangement suggested that the space might have been intended for showing pieces to collectors, investors, or other parties who could appreciate their value and rarity. This possibility raised concerns about whether the artifacts were being prepared for eventual sale or permanent transfer to private hands. The presentation of Queen Elizabeth's personal jewelry in this setting created a particularly unsettling contrast between the item's true significance and their current treatment. Pieces that had been worn during moments of national importance, state ceremonies, and private family gatherings were now displayed as decorative objects divorced from their historical context and cultural meaning. The sapphire pendant, which had appeared in countless photographs during Queen Elizabeth's final public appearances, was mounted in a rotating display case that emphasized its aesthetic qualities while completely ignoring its role in royal ceremonial occasions. The lighting system had been designed to maximize the stone's brilliance and fire, creating a presentation that would appeal to collectors interested in gemstones rather than historical artifacts. Similarly, the emerald coronet had been positioned as the centerpiece of one display area, lit and angled to showcase its craftsmanship and materials, rather than its significance as a symbol of royal authority and tradition. The coronation brooch, with its South African diamonds representing decades of Commonwealth relationships and diplomatic history, was simply described in terms of its component materials and estimated craftsmanship period. Each item had been provided with professionally prepared placards that focused on technical descriptions, while stripping away any reference to royal ownership, ceremonial use, or historical significance. This systematic decontextualization represented a fundamental misunderstanding of what made these artifacts truly valuable to British heritage and culture. The confrontation with L.R. Meredith, the heritage preservation specialist overseeing the collection, provided insights into the sophisticated network behind the artifact transfers. Meredith's immediate response to the recovery team's presence demonstrated his familiarity with legal challenges and his confidence in the documentation supporting the estate's possession of the items. His presentation of official-looking paperwork bearing various crests and authorization signatures showed how thoroughly the operation had been planned and executed. Meredith's professional background became evident through his detailed knowledge of international art markets and private collection management. His previous work with collectors in Monaco and Dubai had clearly provided him with expertise in moving valuable cultural artifacts from institutional to private ownership. The confidence with which he presented his credentials suggested that this was not his first involvement in such transfers. However, despite the apparent legitimacy of his documentation, Meredith's authority could not overcome the legal framework established by the recovery team's warrant from the Privy Council. The hierarchy of legal authority in matters involving royal heritage was clear, and Crown prerogatives took precedence over private contracts or consulting agreements. His attempts to delay or challenge the recovery operation revealed his understanding that time was crucial to maintaining possession of the artifacts. The professional quality of Meredith's operation extended beyond the physical installation to include detailed record-keeping and documentation that would support claims of legitimate ownership if challenged in court. His files contained appraisals, condition reports, and provenance research that demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of art market requirements. This level of preparation indicated that the transfer of royal artifacts had been planned as a permanent arrangement rather than temporary storage. The systematic documentation process that followed the team's assertion of authority emphasized the legal and historical significance of what was being recovered. Each item was photographed in its current display setting to document how it had been presented, then carefully examined for any changes or damage that might have occurred during its time at the estate. Professional conservation techniques were used to remove items from their display cases and prepare them for safe transport. Museum-quality transport containers, specially designed to prevent damage during movement of valuable artifacts, were used to secure each piece. These containers included climate control features, shock absorption systems, and security measures that ensured the artifacts would arrive at Windsor Castle in the same condition they had been found. The meticulous approach to documentation and transport demonstrated the recovery team's understanding of their responsibility to preserve these irreplaceable cultural treasures. The legal framework supporting the recovery operation was based on specific statutes governing royal artifacts and cultural heritage protection. Items designated under Queen Elizabeth's personal custody carried special legal status that prevented unauthorized transfer or sale, regardless of any private agreements or contracts that might have been arranged. This protection extended beyond simple ownership to include responsibilities for preservation and public access that private collectors could not fulfill. The arrival of Queen Consort Camilla marked the most dramatic and consequential moment of the entire operation. Her entrance into the gallery space was accompanied by 2 personal assistants and carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to having her decisions respected and implemented without question. Her immediate assessment of the situation, taking in the open display cases, the documentation equipment, and the transport containers, demonstrated her quick understanding of what was occurring. Camilla's direct challenge to the recovery team's authority revealed her sophisticated understanding of legal and institutional frameworks governing royal property. Her arguments focused on questions of proper authorization, institutional jurisdiction, and the potential consequences of what she characterized as unauthorized interference with private property rights. Her position emphasized that the artifacts had been transferred through legitimate channels and were being properly preserved under professional supervision. The confrontation revealed fundamental philosophical differences about the appropriate role of royal artifacts in contemporary society. Camilla's perspective emphasized private preservation, controlled access, and professional curation as the best methods for protecting valuable cultural items. She argued that the artifacts were receiving better care and more appropriate attention in the private gallery than they had received in institutional storage at Windsor Castle. Her challenge to the recovery operation was not simply about ownership, but about broader questions of cultural stewardship and institutional responsibility. She contended that royal artifacts should be actively preserved and appropriately displayed, rather than stored in archives where they could not be properly appreciated or studied. This argument reflected ongoing debates within cultural institutions about access, preservation, and public benefit. However, despite the sophistication of her arguments, Camilla's position could not overcome the specific legal framework that protected artifacts designated under royal custody. The recovery team's authority was based on statutes that gave the Crown specific rights and responsibilities regarding cultural heritage, regardless of private agreements or alternative preservation arrangements. The hierarchy of legal authority in such matters was clear and could not be challenged through private contracts or consulting agreements. The institutional weight of the confrontation was evident in the careful way both sides presented their positions. Neither party raised voices or made dramatic gestures, but the underlying tension reflected fundamental disagreements about heritage, memory, and the responsibilities that accompanied royal status. The professional restraint shown by all parties demonstrated their understanding of the serious institutional implications of the situation. The sound of helicopter rotors approaching the estate created a turning point that fundamentally altered the dynamics of the confrontation. The distinctive sound of official aircraft indicated the arrival of someone with ultimate authority in matters involving royal heritage, bringing both legal power and institutional legitimacy that could not be challenged or circumvented by other considerations. Prince William's arrival represented the definitive resolution of questions about authority and jurisdiction that had complicated the recovery operation. His presence brought clarity to complex legal and institutional issues, while demonstrating the importance he personally placed on protecting his grandmother's legacy. The decision to involve himself directly in the situation showed his understanding that some matters required personal attention from senior members of the royal family. William's examination of the gallery and his assessment of what had been created there revealed his deep understanding of the cultural significance at stake. His response was measured but decisive, focusing on the fundamental principle that certain artifacts carried responsibilities that went beyond private ownership. The legal decree he presented left no room for negotiation or compromise. The final confrontation between William and Camilla played out with the kind of institutional gravity that major royal decisions typically involved. Neither raised their voice or made dramatic gestures, but the underlying tension reflected fundamental disagreements about heritage, memory, and the responsibilities that came with royal status. William's position emphasized continuity with his grandmother's intentions, while Camilla's response suggested different priorities and approaches to cultural preservation. The quiet resolution that followed demonstrated how institutional authority actually functioned within the royal family. There were no dramatic ultimatums or public confrontations, just the clear assertion of legal authority and the expectation that all parties would comply with properly authorized decisions. Camilla's instruction to allow the recovery to continue represented acceptance of institutional hierarchy rather than agreement with the decision. The return journey to Windsor Castle was conducted with the same professional discretion that had characterized the entire operation. No media attention, no public announcements, just the careful transport of irreplaceable cultural artifacts back to their proper home. The success of the operation ensured that Queen Elizabeth's personal jewelry would remain part of Britain's royal heritage rather than disappearing into private collections. Sergeant Corbin's personal completion of the return process emphasized the individual responsibility that had initiated the entire operation. His decision to carry the final container himself reflected his understanding that preserving cultural heritage required personal commitment as well as institutional authority. The sight of the sapphire pendant returning to its proper place in the legacy chamber symbolized the successful protection of irreplaceable connections to royal history.